Well, thank you to my subscribers for sticking around, even though this channel has basically been non-existent. I've still been around, still monitoring things going on, still have a few things to say. But what really got the brain juices flowing recently is the debate between Walter Block and Curt Doolittle. Basically a showdown of Anarcho Capitalism versus Propertarianism on the question of a just society and a society that could survive. I think Curt's position is that a society that cannot survive competition can't even be called a just society anyway. So the anarcho-capitalist position of arguing what society is just, separate from one that can survive competition, is a moot point. It's a completely bunk dichotomy. But one of the most important points that stuck out to me in this discussion, I'm going to head straight to the end. I do have a few things to say about it, but one of the most prominent ones was near the end, where Walter Block decided to morally defend blackmail. So I'd like to discuss that a little bit from the propertarian perspective. You'll hear two phrases come up in propertarian discussions a lot. One, property as demonstrated interest, and two, status is the human accounting system. Now, the first thing is the propertarian definition of property. It's an evolution of, say, Lockean property rights. Locke, and you'll hear this if you're listening to Stefan Molyneux, Walter Block, a lot of the classical Anglo liberal or libertarian definition of property. You own yourself, you act upon a natural resource, and you transform that resource through your own labor into something that can be consumed. That is your property. Propertarianism expands this definition of property beyond simply physical things. So just to be completely clear, in the old classical liberal or libertarian Anglo property sense, if you dug a hole in a field and that field was nobody's property, you just went to an unowned bit of land and you dug a hole, you used your body, your self-ownership to dig that hole. Therefore, you own that hole because you acted upon nature. So that hole, in a sense, is yours, your property of some description. Propertarianism, being a value-neutral system, expands this definition of property to be that which you invest in and will act to defend. So it would include non-material things such as your reputation, your cultural commons, your ideologies, your beliefs with other people, all of these sort of things. Anything that you will invest in and will act to defend is the propertarian definition of property. So let's keep that in mind, and we say, second, status is the human accounting system. The basis of this is the science of that our brains are hardwired to feel our status in social hierarchies. And so we seek to gain and maintain our status, our social status. This is most eloquently put in Jordan Peterson's analogy of lobsters. Jordan Peterson explained that lobsters have a status counting mechanism in their brain, and this drives their behavior. And his point was that human beings are no different because of shared evolutionary lineage. So we are driven by our genes to acquire and hold status, social status, which in the end really just comes down to reproductive status. If the goal of our genes is to survive, reproduce, then the way we sort who we reproduce with is going to be dependent on acquiring and broadcasting and maintaining our reproductive fitness or status, which a lot of us would interpret or feel as social status. It comes down to reproductive status. The problem with what Walter Block is saying is that if we look at the definition of property in the propertarian system, it includes anything that we will act to invest in or defend. Now, because one of the main drivers of all biological life is reproductive status, then our status is a form of property in the same way our house is, or something physical, or our car. It's the same thing. We will act to invest in and defend this property of our status. And it's not just It's not a small thing, it's a very important thing, because obviously our reproductive status is going to be the underlier of the whole game, the whole reproductive game of nature. It's one of the foundational forces. So it's also a very important form of property. If you're going to blackmail someone, what you are threatening is, unless there's unless there's a direct consequence, like that person will go to jail or be killed, but even if not that bad, what you are threatening when you're blackmailing is social shame or social ostracism. You are threatening their social status. You are threatening a reduction or destruction of their reproductive status. So it's not a small thing to say that you are going to blackmail someone and it's voluntary, so it's all fine. You're actually attacking one of their primary resources, one of their most foundational properties, which is their reproductive status. So because anarcho capitalism or libertarianism limits their definition of property to what we call intersubjectively verifiable property, which means intersubjectively, subjectively means, or subjectively means your perception, intersubjectively, which means the combined subjective perception of other people, I guess. So intersubjectively means we can all see. Intersubjectively verifiable, we can all subjectively agree that this thing is verifiable. So intersubjectively verifiable property means things that we can all subjectively agree on together exist. So a table or a car. That's actually an interesting question of where money would fit into that, because it's these days not a physical thing. So that would be an interesting avenue of inquiry, I think. But the point is, physical property is what libertarians or ANCAPs limit their scope of property to. So they fully understand that if you were going to break into someone's house and steal their gold jewelry, you are profiting from immorality, you are trespassing against their property, and that would be not legitimate, that would be wrong. But because the scope of property for Walter Block does not extend beyond this intersubjectively verifiable physical property, he must then, according to his own philosophical framework, say that blackmail is legitimate. It's a legitimate it's a legitimate way to profit, because it's voluntary, because he's saying I have the right to gossip, because if you don't pay me, I'm going to gossip, and because I own my body, I'm free to, it's like the free speech argument, but once again, in propertarianism, same with free speech, we disambiguate even further to, no, you have the right to free, truthful speech. Because once again, the idea is that if I go around slandering and libeling and making up things, another thing we say is that the truth is very costly. Lies are very low cost, meaning it's faster and easier to lie about someone than it is to prove the truth oftentimes. So people gain status, people gain reproductive advantage, people gain material and social advantage by lying, and the truth can't compete because it's more costly to formulate the truth, to do your due diligence against error, bias, and deceit to formulate a truthful argument or truthful speech. It's more costly than to basically just lie off the top of your head and fling shit at people. So therefore, if you want a just society, you don't just get free speech, you get the right to free truthful speech. And this is one of the basis of what Block is saying, that he has the right to gossip, he has the right to destroy your social and reproductive status by gossiping. He is happy to profit off the destruction of your property in the form of your reproductive status. And because his ideology only looks at physical property, he would in one breath say that for me to break into your house and steal your physical property and profit from stealing your physical property, that would be immoral. But should I profit off destroying your non-physical property, that is moral. but in Propertarianism, because of the expanded definition of property, we can also expand our definition of property rights violations to be consistent and cover more than just physical property. So that's the first point. That no, it would be a crime to gossip about someone if you're going to destroy their status over it. It's not moral, it's not reciprocal, the person doesn't want you to do that, it's not moral. The second point, which is very common, we all know this among Walter Block's tribe, say, is the willingness to profit from an immorality. Makes him immoral again. If someone is doing something immoral, a person who has a vested interest, some ownership, some interest in that society, in the health of the society, would want to stop the immorality. So the example being, if you want to blackmail someone saying, I know you killed a person. Well, a person who has a vested interest, who feels some responsibility, well, let's put it in Propertarian terms, for a person who is investing in defending in that society, if their society is their property, they would want to defend the health, the moral health of that society, and report the person who has committed a crime so that they can face justice. Whereas Walter Block's position on blackmail, he's basically saying, if you commit an injustice, I don't care about the health of this society. I'm not having any responsibility or ownership over this society and seeing you come to justice, but I'm happy to use this situation for my own profit, my own benefit. And once again, we all know this is completely typical of Walter Block's tribe of people, of being in a society yet having no concern for the health of that society, for the commons, not seeing that society as something that they should defend. It's merely something they can exist in and extract as much wealth as possible from, with no care to its survivability or moral health into the future. So the second reason why what he's saying is disgusting is, upon seeing an immorality, using it as an opportunity not to create justice, but an opportunity to profit. So once again, another reason why Block is wrong. Block is wrong on this point, according to the premise of the debate, that no, that is not compatible with a just society, because what he's saying here is not just at all. You're profiting off immorality. Now, the third point is that Block is completely outright lying. He says, I will tell people that you, and this is, this completely ties into point 2, but just to really point it out, Block is completely lying because he says, oh, well, if I'm blackmailing you, I'll go around and tell everyone you have a bath with a rubber ducky. Well, this is a completely innocent example. This would not cause any major embarrassment against anyone whatsoever. The only thing that you're going to make any money out of blackmailing is something where people have a massive incentive to keep it secret. So it's going to be a crime, it's going to be some immorality or some huge social shame that we don't want in our society. So this person would basically be paying you off instead of facing justice or ostracization from their society. So once again, Block's strategy is to profit instead of justice, profit instead of justice, profit instead of morality, profit instead of the health of the larger commons. This is the point at which any moral person who thinks this through really should be over with this ideology. And Curt is completely right that the basis of this ideology is, I want to profit from the society I'm in, but I don't want to owe anything back in return. I want to make money in this society. I want to use the commons of low crime, markets, trust, these commons to extract profit for myself, social reproductive status for myself, but I don't want to have any reciprocal obligation to uphold those commons. This is the fundamental immorality of the ANCAP worldview, and I really hope that anyone who spends more than a couple of years thinking about this is ready to move on to a much more mature worldview, much more fully accounted for, much more well thought out system of Propertarianism.